Propaganda that still works, 5 techniques from history. Introduction, the machinery never retired. Here is an uncomfortable exercise. Take the crudest, most infamous propaganda of the 20th century, the posters, the broadcasts, the staged rallies that we now study in museums with a shudder of superiority, and strip away the period costume, the uniforms, the fonts, the scratchy audio. What remains underneath is a set of techniques. Now look at your phone. The techniques are all still there, running at scales their inventors could not have dreamed of, wearing today's costumes so convincingly that we extend them the one courtesy we would never extend their ancestors. We don't call them propaganda. This is the central deception of our historical education. We teach propaganda as a story about villains, a handful of dark geniuses, safely dead, rather than as what it actually was and is, an engineering discipline. Its pioneers were explicit about this. Edward Bernays, the American who founded modern public relations, titled his 1928 book simply Propaganda, and described the conscious and intelligent manipulation of mass opinion as an invisible government. The regimes that industrialized his insights treated persuasion as logistics, messages designed, tested, repeated, and distributed like ammunition. Engineering disciplines do not die with their engineers. They get textbooks, and the textbooks get new students. So this article does the exercise properly. 5 techniques, each with its historical fingerprint and its modern uniform, because the point of studying old propaganda was never to feel superior to the past. It was to recognize the machinery when it is pointed at you, which, as we will see, is approximately always. Technique 1, repetition, the lie told 1,000 times. The oldest discovery of mass persuasion is also the most humbling about human cognition. Familiarity feels like truth. The totalitarian propagandists of the 20th century built their entire method on this single hinge, the same slogans, the same phrases, the same images, hammered identically across every poster, broadcast, classroom, and parade, on the explicit theory that the masses would come to accept whatever was repeated relentlessly enough. They restricted their messaging to a few points and repeated them, in the words of the era's practitioners, over and over. A half-century later, psychologists gave the hinge a name, the illusory truth effect. In experiment after experiment, statements repeated to subjects are rated more true than statements heard once, even when subjects know better, even when the statement was originally flagged as false. Repetition does not persuade the reasoning mind, it bypasses it, converting mere processing fluency, this feels easy and familiar, into the sensation of validity, this feels right. Now the modern uniform. The technique no longer needs a ministry, it has an architecture. Talking points cascade identically across networks of outlets and accounts within hours. Algorithmic feeds show you engagement-winning claims not once but dozens of times, from dozens of apparently independent sources, a repetition machine no dictator could have staffed. Even debunking feeds it, every fact-check repeats the claim it corrects, and the claim, not the correction, gains the fluency. The defense is a habit of self-audit. When a proposition feels obviously true, ask whether you can recall actually learning it, the evidence, the source, the argument, or whether you have merely encountered it many times. Everyone knows is not a citation. It is, historically speaking, a fingerprint. Technique 2, the enemy image, us, them, and the portrait of them. The second technique is the workhorse of every mobilization in recorded history. Construct an enemy, simplify it, darken it, and unify your audience against it. The 20th century's regimes turned enemy construction into a visual and rhetorical science, the racial caricatures, the vermin metaphors, the enemies of the people, the wreckers and saboteurs blamed for every shortage. The technique's power comes from 2 ancient circuits at once, fear, which narrows thinking and heightens obedience, and group identity, which converts complex social reality into the oldest story we know, us versus them. The mechanics deserve close attention, because they are subtler than mere insult. Effective enemy images dehumanize by category. The enemy is never individuals with mothers and reasons, but a mass, a swarm, a disease. They attribute coordination, scattered opponents become a conspiracy with a plan, and they perform inversion, whatever the propagandist does is projected onto the enemy first, the aggressor is always defending. Above all, the enemy explains everything, your hardship, your humiliation, your uncertainty, all given a face. The modern uniform barely bothers to change. Political communication on every continent, across every ideological pole, runs on outgroup portraits engineered for maximum arousal. They hate you, they are coming for your children, they are not merely wrong but evil, subhuman, coordinated. Social platforms supercharge the technique because outrage against them is the single most shareable emotion in the metrics. The algorithm, indifferent to politics, has become history's most efficient enemy image distributor. The defense: treat any message whose primary product is hatred of a category of people as manufacturing, whatever its politics. The tell is explanatory greed. When one group explains everything wrong in your life, you are not looking at analysis. You are looking at a portrait, painted for you, with a purpose. Technique 3, the bandwagon, manufactured unanimity. The third technique targets the most social of our instincts, the deep human need to stand with the majority. 20th-century regimes staged unanimity as theater, the packed rallies, the 99% plebiscites, the endless footage of cheering crowds, not to persuade the enthusiastic, but to isolate the doubtful. If everyone around you appears to believe, dissent feels less like disagreement and more like defect. Social psychologist Solomon Asch supplied the laboratory proof in the 1950s. A large share of ordinary people will deny the plain evidence of their own eyes about the length of a line on a card rather than contradict a unanimous room. Later scholars added the refinement that makes staged consensus so effective: the spiral of silence. People who sense their view is unpopular stop voicing it, which makes it appear rarer still, which silences more people, until a vocal minority wears the costume of everyone. The modern uniform is the metric. Likes, shares, view counts, trending panels, visible popularity numbers attached to every claim, constitute a permanent, ambient bandwagon signal. And the numbers are manufacturable: bot networks, purchased engagement, coordinated brigades, and astroturf campaigns, fake grassroots. The term itself is a monument to the technique, can conjure a consensus overnight. Even honestly, algorithms amplify what is already popular, converting small early leads into apparent unanimity. The defense is to formally separate two questions your brain wants to merge: is this widely held, and is this true? The first is a fact about crowds, often faked and always irrelevant to the second. History's most useful mental image here: the Asch subject who answered accurately regardless, and the finding, less famous but more hopeful, that a single dissenting ally in the room collapsed the conformity effect almost entirely. Consensus theater requires unanimity. Be, or find, the one other voice. Technique 4, the big lie and the firehose, overwhelming the truth. The fourth technique concerns the industrial logic of falsehood itself, and it has two historical models. The first, articulated with chilling openness in the totalitarian era, is the big lie: falsehood so colossal that ordinary people cannot believe anyone would fabricate it. Since they themselves lie only in small ways, they assume no one would have the impudence to invent something enormous. The lie's size is its armor: modest lies get checked, monstrous ones get benefit of the doubt. The second model is newer and, analysts argue, now dominant, what Rand researchers dubbed the firehose of falsehood: high volume, multi-channel, rapid, continuous, and shamelessly inconsistent messaging. Unlike classical propaganda, the firehose does not need you to believe any particular claim. It floods the zone with dozens of contradictory versions of every event until the audience, exhausted, concludes that nothing can be known. Who can say what really happened? The product is not conviction but epistemic surrender. A public that has stopped believing truth is findable is a public that cannot coordinate against anything. The modern uniform needs no description, you swim in it. Every contested event now arrives pre-packaged with its swarm of alternative narratives: it's just asking questions, it's synthetic media muddying even video evidence. The defense against the big lie is the historian's discipline: magnitude is not evidence, extraordinary claims need more support, not less. The defense against the firehose is stranger and more important: recognize that cynicism is the product. The moment you catch yourself concluding everyone lies, nothing can be known, notice that this conclusion, universal doubt, is precisely what the machinery was built to install. The answer to a flood of falsehood is not believing nothing, it is the slower, unfashionable work of trusting methods, sources with track records, claims with evidence, corrections openly made. Technique 5, Transfer and the Halo, Borrowed Authority. The final technique is the quietest, attaching the message to something the audience already loves, trusts, or reveres, so that credibility flows across the connection like current. The classical propagandists were masters of transfer, draping regimes in flags, faith, folklore, and the iconography of motherhood and harvest, parading scientists, artists, and athletes as endorsers, wrapping brutal policy in the vocabulary of health, purity, and defense. The mechanism is the halo effect, documented by psychologists a century ago. Positive feeling toward a source spills, unearned, onto every claim the source touches. We do not evaluate messages, we evaluate messengers, and then stop evaluating. The modern uniform is an entire economy. Influencer marketing is transfer as a business model, parasocial trust, cultivated over years of relatable content, rented out claim by claim. Political operations launder talking points through beloved local voices, veterans, doctors, moms. As seen in credentials, celebrity endorsements, scientific-looking citations that dissolve on inspection, patriotic and spiritual packaging on wholly commercial products, all transfer, all day. The defense is a single discipline of decoupling. When you notice warmth toward a messenger, deliberately detach it from the message and ask the cold question, what does this person actually know about this claim, and what are they paid, in money or belonging, to say it? Trust is properly earned per domain and per claim. Any persuasion that works by borrowing trust from somewhere else has told you it could not earn its own. Conclusion: the museum is open, and you live in it. 5 techniques: repetition that counterfeits truth, enemy images that convert fear into unity, bandwagons that counterfeit consensus, floods that drown the very idea of fact, and halos that launder claims through beloved faces. Every one has a century of documented use, a body of experimental psychology explaining its grip, and a thriving modern career. The costume changes, the machinery never has, because the machinery was never really about ideology. It was about us, our fluency mistaken for truth, our tribalism, our conformity, our fatigue, our trust. Propaganda is applied human nature, which is why it survives every regime that wields it. And that is also why the defense is personal before it is political. Media literacy is not a suspicion of everything, it is a set of small, learnable habits, asking where a familiar fact was actually learned, refusing portraits of categorical enemies, separating popularity from validity, treating induced cynicism as an attack rather than a sophistication, and decoupling messengers from messages. None of these habits requires a degree. All of them require the one admission the propagandist most fears from an audience, that the techniques work on me, that the museum's exhibits are not warnings about other, weaker generations, but mirrors, and the machinery they describe is running now, in your feed, in your language, wearing your era's clothes. The visitors who accept that are the only ones who ever really leave the museum free.